no doubt that Abdullah the Butcher scars his opponents.
I have to wake up every day and look at this.
So there's this old adage in wrestling that red equals green. And no, that isn't just wrestlers getting their green cross code muddled up, though that would go some way to explain the number of car accidents broadcast on national TV.
Good God Almighty! Look at him! Oh my God!
It's to do with blood. Crimson, copper-smelling blood. His blood. Well, his blood. Or his. Blood running over a wrestler's face, forming a crimson mask and creating an image that is somehow both terrifying and sympathetic. Almost as if we need this stuff to live, and here it is, buckets of it just pouring out over the mat. It can make you wonder how your favourite babyface is still standing. It can feel like poetic comeuppance for your hated heel, or it can just show you how much these two men despise each other as they beat 7 bells and 6 pints of the red stuff out of each other. Blood in wrestling has been used to shock audiences for years, creating the kind of visceral response that gets people talking, which usually increases ticket sales and has people coming from miles around to see the spectacle. But it also did something much more useful for wrestling back when it was in the kayfabe closet. It added a dose of reality. Problem is though that bleeding on cue isn't in many people's repertoires. So over the years, wrestlers turned to many cunning tricks and thousands of slicing nicks in order to get colour. But with a litany of incidents occurring around blading, new knowledge of infections, and a shift towards family-focused entertainment, does the practice have any place in modern wrestling? I'm Laurie, hailing from partsFUNknown, and this is Blading Explained. So before we crack on with the episode, please consider giving us a subscribe so you never miss content like this, or support us on patreon.com/partsFUNknown for loads of awesome rewards and early access to all future videos in this series. For the uninitiated among you, blading is the practice of cutting oneself during a wrestling match or a segment in order to produce blood, or to put it in cutesy wrestling terms, juice. Now historically, the most popular way to produce this sanguinous sunny delight is with the use of a small razor blade to nick the forehead, which, due to the number of blood vessels present, tends to get the juice flowing like a birthday party during dry January. Now the added benefits of this particular spot is that it also mixes with the sweat mid-match and begins to truly cover the face in crimson. It also apparently heals really quickly to boot. Just don't try it at home, because it is actually really very stupid and really quite old idea. Because purposefully bleeding in pro wrestling goes back at least as far as the 1930s and a man named Kirby Watkins, who learned how to wrestle in the Navy and went on to make a name for himself as Sailor Watkins. Say what you see. Now Watkins was wild in the ring and described by one newspaper as climbing the ropes and beating his chest like a monkey, but he also liked to add a little zest to some of his matches by drawing blood from his opponents, either with his teeth, his sharpened fingernails, or the metal tips of his bootlaces. Now you know why they call drawing blood without a blade hard way. It sucks. His success spawned imitators in Ica like dangerous Danny McShane, who was already infamous for a stiff working style, opting to just deck his opponents rather than affording them the opportunity to merely act like they'd been hit. He also pioneered a piledriver finisher that just involved dropping people on their heads. Nowadays he'd be a lawsuit waiting to happen. Back then, really big star. Anyway, he added to his roughhousing repertoire by adopting blading to add some much needed realism to his matches. Now blading only grew in popularity from there, becoming common around the middle of the 20th century as blood made the transition from this grotesque extra to a featured event stipulation with the advent of first blood matches, where the loser was the first to bleed. The weakling. And this was when the wider industry cottoned onto the idea that red equals green, i.e. blood is money. For example, during a match in the 1950s, Mark Lewin accidentally kneed Mike Sharp in the face, busting him open hard way. Lewin then said in an interview after that, There was no blood in San Francisco at the time, so that was the first thing people saw, and business just shot up. So promoters were basically yelling, "Come and see the amazing bleeding man," and people were just handing over their dollars in droves, which did in fact cause kickbacks for the performers too. Now, Don Fargo of the Fabulous Fargos used to say that he'd let people bust him open over the eye for an extra $25. Now, one walking bloodbath attraction was the Sheik, cool original flavour, aka Edward George Farhat, who throughout the 60s and 70s would conceal bits of wood, pencils and other sharp objects about his attire to stab his opponents with. He is the uncle of Sabu, which frankly explains quite a lot. Now, despite the graphic nature of his particular brand of grappling, word often spread of the Sheik's coming, and folks would flock to bask in the blood and guts glory. One man who turned his notoriety for blading into a nightmare for his opponents was Abdullah the Butcher. The Sudanese sadist with deep rivulets dug into his forehead from aggressive attempts to get colour. Like the Sheik, Abdullah's reputation for recklessness preceded him, and he was used as a special attraction on wrestling shows throughout Canada and the United States in the 60s when blood put bums on seats. But Abdullah's violence wasn't always vetted with his opponents, and he would often overstep boundaries, as described by superstar Billy Graham when recollecting a show he worked on with the Butcher.
He just started slicing this Indian's face up and his neck and his shoulders, and my God, it was like manslaughter. And we went back to the locker room, and I get back there and I see this Indian standing there covered with blood from his head to his wrestling boots, literally covered in blood, and he was a dark-skinned Indian, and he was starting to turn white from losing blood. And I said, this guy is gonna die. It was chilling.
And when Billy asked why Abdullah had mutilated his opponent without consent,
I had to give my heat, baby. I had to give my heat.
wrestling. But perhaps most notable among Abdullah's transgressions, though, is reportedly infecting Devon Hannibal Nicholson with hepatitis C by blading him without consent during a series of matches around 2007. Nicholson later sued and won a $2.3 million judgment in 2014. But this is the thing, during the 60s when Abdullah was growing in infamy for his ferocity, the secrets of wrestling were closely held, and it wasn't until the mid-1980s when the veil was lifted and the true dangers of blading became apparent for all. During an expose on the business by 2020 that also peeled the curtain back on kayfabe, former NFL quarterback turned pro wrestler Eddie Mansfield not only taught John Stossel how to take a bump, but sort of casually showed off how wrestlers cut themselves to create some claret.
Some keep the blade right here in their mouth, some in their tights, some on their finger. Well, you take it out like that, you go just like that. See, if I was sweating, it'd pour.
During the course of the interview, Mansfield lifted the lid on a few of wrestling's big secrets, but none of them were quite as grisly as blading. Because it seems like there's a certain power to blood being used during a performance, and often the feeling is that more is better, which is why some wrestlers would take an aspirin before the show, or have a beer in order to thin their blood and get the gush just right. And it's also why some overzealous individuals likely cut too deep and ended up needing stitches. Oh, and by the way, entirely a sex tape for the gush thing. One big work, blood is something that isn't easy to fake. So it's no wonder that promoters were protective of the practice of blade.
Especially in TV studios, if they were doing an angle and somebody got popped and the blade flew out in the audience, well then back in the old days, especially in the South or in Texas or whatever, the next week somebody on TV would do a hard way right in front of the audience so they could see it. Make sure they knew it was real, right?
And as discussed earlier, bleeding hard way sucked. Like, in the 50s before blading hit the big time, guys used to get bloody by being hit with a bare knuckle right above the eye, and yeah, as that wound became scar tissue, that particular spot became a little bit easier to bust open, but yikes! Then there's also tales of people tenderizing their foreheads with a fork before matches so they bust open better, which hardly sounds sanitary. Which is one of the major concerns when it comes to blading and bleeding in wrestling matches in general, as I was told by trained nurse Carla, who has worked as a medic on wrestling shows up and down the UK for a few years now.
My main concern though is if they're blading and then they're still in the ring for a while afterwards, those canvases aren't the cleanest. I've seen wrestling canvases. Usually if someone's going to blade, it's usually the main event, so it's after a lot of people have been in that ring. And even though I know that it is wrestling etiquette that you don't wear outside shoes in the ring, you don't do anything like that, there's still people that do. When before the show starts, they jump in, they have a little roll around, they do things like that. So you don't really know what's on that canvas. They're so big, it's how often are they being cleaned? So that's one of my worries for anything that could get into there that would cause some sort of infection. Also, just the cleanliness of the blade. Where are they keeping this blade throughout the match? Are they tucking it in a boot? Are they tucking it in their wrist tape? Anything like that? Then there's the risk of if it's in their wrist tape, if they then fall on it, if it goes funny, end up cutting somewhere else. If they, just discard it afterwards, where are they discarding it to? Who's going to get hold of it?
From talking to Carla, it seems that one small slash can really set off a whole chain of questions and concerns for medical professionals that, man, you really got to weigh up the importance of the spot in terms of the storytelling and impact before you bother going through with it. And just in case you needed some, here are even more reasons not to.
One thing that does worry me is that if it's someone, especially someone who isn't experienced at blading, once you're in that ring or you're under that spotlight, you've got everybody watching you, your adrenaline is pumping. They may not necessarily realise how deep they are cutting. So if they do it too deep, or if they do it too many times, there's always the risk of too much blood loss, and just they're just gonna make a mess of their faces as well. And then there's also risks of anything that might be bloodborne, so any bloodborne infections, so your hepatitis, things like that. If someone just decides on the day that that's what they're going to do, they probably haven't had relevant tests or anything like that, and it's have they had immunisation. Even just small blood splatters can go quite far. And if you're an audience member, you're sat front row, and someone spins around, you get some of that blood, it goes in your eye, it goes in your mouth, anything like that, you run the risk of getting an infection as well.
And these risks are definitely why blading died out in the mainstream environment. As wrestling tilted towards family entertainment in the mid-80s and the AIDS epidemic was causing global headlines, the WWF tried to stomp out the practice, while WCW carried on well into the 90s, but they eventually outlawed it as well. And there are other factors to take into consideration too, like having to re-edit live sections for reruns, or the ratings of things when they eventually make their way to DVD and VHS. Even now, if someone bleeds, they have to make the video black and white on YouTube to get around the algorithm. I have had to be so careful editing this video. I mean, I haven't done it yet because I actually have to do this bit to do that bit, but I will have been careful, and you will have noticed by this point in the video. So with the risks of being sued, hurting relationships with broadcasters or brand partners, it means that you've got to have regulations in place when it comes to this stuff. Like pre-contract testing to root out bloodborne infections, but also a zero-tolerance policy to the act itself. Now, over the years, they've enforced that with fines, like when Batista bladed against Jericho in a steel cage match on Raw, for which he not only got slapped with a band-aid, but also a $100,000 fine. Around with the company long after that. And you just gotta think, did it make the wrestling better? Did the mass transit incident make that match any better? Was Batista's blade jobs $100,000 worth of drama? I mean, is it actually good wrestling? I mean, is it, Luke?
No.
Late 1940s, we'd begun to see a handful of boys who regularly used blood in their matches, and they used it for one simple reason. They couldn't do anything else. It was the cheapest way of attracting attention, but it worked, and it was a way for them to stay employed. And in a world of PG wrestling on mainstream TV, blood has been deployed to good effect by the likes of AEW to differentiate themselves from their closest competitor. Cody, with his flare blonde hair, has been dyeing it red on the reg just like Rick did. You got Joey Janela in his predilections for thumbtacks, and a champion in Jon Moxley who left WWE exactly so he could go back to this hardcore style of wrestling. And yeah, a lot of the times that blood is hard way, but this certainly wasn't, and it is one of the most powerful moments of wrestling storytelling for a good few years. Now naturally, Vince McMahon slammed them for the blood and the guts and the gory things they've been doing, but since then WWE popped somebody's eye out on pay-per-view, so it's kind of the pot calling the kettle Tyler Black. And it just proves that the impact of this more extreme violence hasn't exactly gone unnoticed by WWE. Because like I said earlier, there's just something powerful about blood, some primal responses the sight of it just provokes in us, one that won't let us look away. Psychiatrist Dr. David Henderson said that this plays into our response to tragedy. He said witnessing violence and destruction, whether it's in a novel, a movie, on TV, or in a real life scene playing out in front of us in real time, it gives us the opportunity to confront our fears of death, pain, despair, degradation and annihilation while still feeling some level of safety. We watch because we are allowed to ask ourselves ultimate questions with an intensity of emotion that is uncoupled from the true reality of the disaster. If I was in that situation, what would I do? We play out the different scenarios in our head because it helps us to reconcile that which is uncontrollable and our need to remain in control. Then you chuck into that roiling cauldron of emotions what psychologists call the negative bias. As psychologist Dr. Renee Carr put it, negative bias is the tendency to automatically give more attention to a negative event and negative information than positive information or events, which a cursory glance at the YouTube analytics for the WrestleTalk news episodes would prove. The more negative the headline, generally speaking, the more views. And it's also meant the instances where wrestlers have bladed, or at least bled, become lasting memories. It's Austin passing out in the sharpshooter, Eddie Guerrero pouring pints against JBL, or that image of Dustin Rhodes crying out covered in blood, which is just seared into my mind. The sociologist Emil Durkheim posited that blood was one of the bases of human religious experience, that our earliest ancestors would create totems with it or paint their histories with it, and that this has trickled down to all of our social and spiritual existences. So there's something almost poetic and almost certainly gross about blading's legacy in wrestling. As wrestler Damien Demento wrote to his New York State senator in order to pressure them to ban blading. Sadly, many wrestlers feel this practice is a tradition and feel a kinship to the business if they perform this. So it's a ritual, in a kind of macabre, witchy Bray Wyatt mould. Because what could show more dedication to your craft than giving your blood for it? To bleed onto the same canvas your forebears did, to become part of the fraternity. And just to bring it all back to why that is not a good thing, Carla, the trained nurse, said this.
As a medical professional, no. There is no place for blading within wrestling.
But then she said,
ultimately, the medical professional in me overrides it all, and I would say no. But as a wrestling fan, if I was just a wrestling fan, I wouldn't like to see it every show. I wouldn't like to see it used too often. But occasionally, when it's a surprise, when it's just a shock, and you just think, wow, oh my goodness, it really can enhance the story.
And isn't that kind of what all of wrestling is? Like a conflict between the head and the heart? of knowing you shouldn't enjoy something and that you should really look away, but not being able to tear your eyes from the ring for even a moment, of screaming please don't die and holy shit as someone does something you know deep down is monumentally stupid for the purposes of your entertainment, and fuck me, are you not entertained, but you're also seriously considering calling an ambulance. And then you always sort of know in the back of your mind that if done correctly, this is the case with most wrestling, people shouldn't actually be badly hurt. So then when it comes to blading and the very real risks involved, not just for the performers, but everyone involved in the show, right down to the audience, you have to think it's probably too real for modern wrestling. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up or share it around on social media and Reddit, as that would really help us out. Leave a comment down below too, answering the question whether you think there's a place for blading in modern wrestling, and let's keep the conversation going. And like I said earlier, please subscribe to partsFUNknown for more in-depth wrestling videos, but the very best way to support us is on Patreon. Patreon.com/partsFUNknown. And at all the different tiers you get ace rewards like early access to our videos, a fan Quizzlemania, and you can even have your name read out by one of us like these lovely $25 backers. Terry Hankemer, Daniel Bridger, Daniel the Mayor of Painesville Schachtmeyer, Dan Corral, Tim Dakumar, Matty J, Matt Jodaween, Julio Trejo, Vincent Garcia, Christian Womble, Brandon Sayers, Joe Meyer, Arbor Safriri, John Scheindelman, Soren Nord, Max Wallen, Glenn Dallas, Matthew Hernandez, Stephen Mazzafaro, Lynn Bell, and Kyle Brazel. So thanks again for watching, and if you're new to Explained or you're just looking for something to watch, why not check out the videos I did earlier this year, like this one on the creation of The Fiend where I spoke to the amazing artist who helped design the mask, or this one on Green Mist and its mystical origins. They aren't actually that mystical. Until next time, jam that jam.